In this video, we're going to be continuing on with the KutaSoftware Infinite Algebra 1 free worksheet excluded values, picking up where we left off with number 11. Now, for excluded values, essentially when dealing with fractions, we cannot have 0 as the denominator. So we're going to set the denominator equal to 0 and then solve, and that value will be our excluded value. So x minus 2 equals 0 when, if we add 2 to both sides, we'll have x remaining on the left-hand side, and that's equal to a positive 2. So our excluded value in number 11 is positive 2. And I'll write this in set notation because some of the problems will have multiple solutions. Let's continue on to number 12. In number 12, if 20n is equal to 0, then we cannot complete this division because dividing by 0 does not result in a solution. So if 20n equals 0, we'll solve for that n value, and that will be our excluded value. So if we divide by 20, we'll get that n is equal to 0. So in number 12, our excluded value is 0. If n is 0, 0 times 20 equals 0, and we'll have 0 as our denominator, which we cannot divide a quantity by 0. Therefore, n equals 0 is our excluded value. Let's continue on to the second page. For number 13, our denominator is 6 minus x. So when 6 minus x equals 0, solving for x will give us our excluded value. So if we add x to both sides, we'll get that positive 6 is equal to a positive x. Therefore, 6 is our excluded value in number 13. And 6 minus 6 does indeed give us 0, and we cannot divide a quantity by 0. In number 14, we have 40k plus 48. So when 40k plus 48 equals 0, that's when we can solve for our excluded value for k. Now 40 and 48 are divisible by a common number, and that is 8. If I pull out an 8, 8 times 5 is 40, so I'll have 5k plus, and 8 times 6 is 48. So within my parentheses, I'll have 5k plus 6, and that's getting multiplied to 8. So that binomial factored is 8 times 5k plus 6, and that's going to be equivalent to 0. When that equals 0, we'll solve for k to get our excluded value. Now remember, 0 times any quantity is equal to 0. So 8 times 0 will equal 0. So we're solving for when 5k plus 6 equals 0. And 5k plus 6 equals 0. We'll subtract 6 from both sides to get that 5k is equal to a negative 6. And then, dividing by 5, we'll get that k is equal to a negative 6/5. So negative 6/5 is our excluded value in number 14. Plugging negative 6/5 in for k will result in 0 in the denominator. In number 15, we're looking at the quantity 10x plus 90. 10x plus 90 is in our denominator, and when that's equal to 0, we will be able to solve for our excluded value for x. So I'll start by subtracting 90 from both sides. That'll leave me with 10x on the left-hand side of my equation, and that's going to be equal to negative 90. Finally, I'll divide by 10 and then simplify. X equals negative 90 divided by 10, which is a negative 9. Therefore, in number 15, our excluded value is 9. Now, on to number 16. We have the quantity x squared plus 5x minus 14 in our denominator. So I'm going to start by factoring that, and then setting it equal to 0. So what two numbers multiply to give me negative 14 and add to give me a positive 5? Well, the factors of 14 that will work are 7 and 2, where that 2 is negative, because 7 times negative 2 equals negative 14, and 7 plus negative 2 equals a positive 5. So I'll rewrite x squared plus 5x minus 14 as x plus 7 times x minus 2. And note, because I'm solving for those excluded values, or I'm trying to figure out what those excluded values are, that occurs when the denominator is equal to 0. So the factored form of my quadratic, when that equals 0, I will solve for my excluded values. And that occurs when x plus 7 equals 0 and when x minus 2 equals 0. So x plus 7 equals 0 when, subtracting 7 from both sides, x is equal to a negative 7. And x minus 2 equals 0, adding 2 to both sides, when x is equal to a positive 2. So if x is negative 7 plus 7 is 0, and 0 times any quantity is 0. When x is equal to 2, x plus 7 will be multiplied to 2 minus 2, which is 0, and 0 times any quantity is 0. Therefore, my excluded values in number 16 are negative 7 and 2. When x is equal to either of those, our denominator will be 0, and we cannot solve when dividing by a 0. Continuing on to number 17, again you can see we have a quadratic as our denominator, so I'm going to rewrite that in factored form. So what two numbers multiply to give me negative 9 and add to give me a positive 8? The factors of 9 that will work for that are 1 and 9, where the 1 is negative, because negative 1 times 9 is negative 9, and negative 1 plus 9 is a positive 8. So I'll rewrite my quadratic that's in the denominator as n minus 1 times n plus 9. And when that's equal to 0, we cannot divide by a 0 in the denominator, so we'll solve for when that's equal to 0 in order to get our excluded values for n. So when n minus 1 equals 0, we'll have an excluded value, and when n plus 9 equals 0, we'll have an excluded value. N minus 1 equals 0 when, adding 1 to both sides in order to cancel out that 1, n is equal to a positive 1. And n plus 9 equals 0, subtracting 9 from both sides to get that n all by itself, that's going to be n equal to a negative 9. So my excluded values in number 17 are negative 9 and 1. When n is equal to either of those, we will be dividing by a 0, which will give us an undefined answer. Therefore, those are excluded values. Now lastly in this video, I'm going to be going over number 18. If you have any questions up until this point, please put them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Also, if you haven't done so before this video, like, subscribe, and share. All likes and subscriptions are greatly appreciated, and just let me know that you're finding these videos useful. Now hopefully that you've done that, let's continue on with number 18. In number 18, we're going to set the denominator equal to 0 and solve to get our excluded values. So we have 10n plus 10 equal to 0. Now one way to do this is to subtract 10 from both sides to get that 10n equals negative 10, and then when we divide by 10, we'll get that n is equal to a negative 1. So negative 1 is our excluded value in number 18. However, let me show you one other way to think about this. If we have 10n plus 10 and we're setting that equal to 0, let's pull out a 10 from each of the terms. So we'll have 10 times the quantity n plus 1, and that's equal to 0. And then we can look at n plus 1 and know that 10 times 0 will indeed equal 0. So if n plus 1 equals 0, then this entire quantity will equal 0. So n plus 1 equals 0 when n is negative 1, because negative 1 plus 1 equals 0. Continue on to the next video where I'll finish this worksheet completing numbers 19 through 26. And again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.